The electoral process, primaries, caucuses, and party conventions. The electoral process is the cornerstone of American democracy, enabling citizens to shape their government by selecting representatives and leaders. Central to this process are the primaries, caucuses, and party conventions, which serve as critical stages in the presidential election cycle. Understanding these components provides insight into how candidates are chosen and how the democratic process unfolds. The presidential election cycle. The presidential election cycle is a complex, multi-year process involving several key stages. A. Primaries and caucuses. Primaries and caucuses are the initial steps in selecting party nominees for the presidency. These processes allow citizens to express their preferences for candidates and are instrumental in determining who will represent each party in the general election. Primaries. Primaries are straightforward elections where voters cast ballots for their preferred candidate. There are two main types of primaries. Closed primaries. Only registered party members can vote in their party's primary. This system ensures that only those who are affiliated with a party can influence the choice of their party's nominee. Open primaries. Voters can choose to vote in either party's primary, regardless of their own party affiliation. This approach can lead to more cross-party influence and strategic voting, where voters might choose to participate in the opposing party's primary to influence the selection of a weaker candidate. Semi-closed primaries. Similar to closed primaries, but they also allow unaffiliated voters to participate. This system seeks to balance party loyalty with broader voter inclusion. Primaries are held at different times across states, beginning with the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, which are traditionally the first and often set the tone for the rest of the election cycle. States then hold their primaries on varying dates, often referred to as Super Tuesday, when multiple states vote simultaneously, creating a significant impact on the momentum of candidates. Caucuses. Caucuses are less common than primaries and involve a more deliberative process. Voters gather at local meetings to discuss and vote for their preferred candidate. Unlike primaries, which are private and individual, caucuses are public and often require participants to actively debate and persuade others. State party caucuses. In these meetings, participants discuss the merits of the candidates and cast votes. These votes are typically tallied to allocate delegates who will support the chosen candidate at the national convention. Precinct caucuses. These are the most localized form of caucuses, where voters meet in their precincts to express their preferences. The results are then used to select delegates for higher-level caucuses or conventions. Caucuses can be time-consuming and demanding, requiring a higher level of commitment from participants compared to primaries. They often involve extensive debate and negotiation, reflecting the more engaged nature of the participants. B. Party conventions. After primaries and caucuses determine the leading candidates, party conventions serve as the official culmination of the nomination process. These national events are critical for several reasons. Official nomination. At the convention, each party formally nominates its candidate for the presidency. Delegates from across the country gather to cast their votes based on the results of the primaries and caucuses. The candidate who secures the majority of delegate votes becomes the party's official nominee. Party platform. In addition to nominating the presidential candidate, conventions are where parties adopt their platforms. The platform outlines the party's positions on key issues and serves as a guide for the party's policies and legislative goals. This document reflects the collective priorities and values of the party, shaping the general election campaign and influencing the future direction of the party. Unity and campaign kickoff. Conventions are also strategic opportunities for parties to unify and launch their general election campaigns. They provide a stage for the nominee to address the nation, articulate their vision, and galvanize party members. The convention often features speeches, endorsements, and celebrations designed to energize the party base and build momentum heading into the general election. 2. The general election. Following the conventions, the general election is the final stage where voters choose between the nominated candidates from each party. This election determines who will become the next president of the United States. The general election is held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and it involves a nationwide vote. Electoral College. The general election is not a direct popular vote, but rather an electoral college system. Each state is allocated a certain number of electoral votes based on its representation in Congress. Voters in each state cast their ballots for a slate of electors pledged to their chosen candidate. The candidate who receives the majority of electoral votes wins the presidency. This system reflects the federal nature of the U.S. government and ensures that all states, regardless of size, have a role in the election. Campaigns and debates. The period between the conventions and the general election is marked by intense campaigning. Candidates travel across the country, participate in debates, and engage in various forms of outreach to sway undecided voters and solidify their support. Media coverage, advertisements, and public appearances are crucial in shaping public perception and influencing voter decisions. Conclusion. The electoral process, including primaries, caucuses, and party conventions, is fundamental to American democracy. These stages not only determine the candidates who will appear on the general election ballot, but also reflect the broader principles of representative democracy and party politics. Understanding these components provides a deeper appreciation of the democratic process and the intricate mechanisms that enable citizens to choose their leaders. 2. Primaries and caucuses. The primaries and caucuses are essential mechanisms in the U.S. electoral process, serving as the initial steps in the selection of presidential candidates. Each system plays a distinct role in how candidates are chosen, reflecting different aspects of democratic participation and party dynamics. Primaries. Primaries are state-level elections in which registered voters cast secret ballots to express their preference for a presidential candidate. This process determines the distribution of delegates to the national party conventions, where the final party nominee is chosen. Primaries can be categorized into several types based on voter eligibility and participation rules. 1. Types of primaries. Closed primaries. In closed primaries, only registered party members can vote in their party's primary. This system is designed to ensure that only those who have declared allegiance to a party can influence the selection of that party's nominee. For example, in a closed primary, a registered Democrat can only vote in the Democratic primary, and a registered Republican can only vote in the Republican primary. The closed primary system aims to protect party integrity and ensure that the nominees reflect the preferences of committed party members. However, it can also limit voter participation to those who are already affiliated with the party. Open primaries. Open primaries allow any registered voter, regardless of party affiliation, to participate in either party's primary. This approach promotes greater inclusivity and can lead to increased voter turnout. For instance, an independent voter or a voter registered with a different party can choose to vote in the Democratic or Republican primary. While open primaries can encourage broader participation, they also open the door to strategic voting, where voters may choose to vote in the primary of the opposing party to influence the selection of a weaker candidate. Semi-closed primaries. This system is a hybrid between closed and open primaries. In a semi-closed primary, registered party members vote in their own party's primary, while unaffiliated voters are allowed to choose which party's primary to vote in. This system aims to balance party loyalty with broader voter inclusion, allowing unaffiliated voters to have a say while maintaining some degree of party control. Top 2 primaries. In some states, a top 2 primary system is used, where all candidates, regardless of party affiliation, compete in a single primary. The top 2 vote-getters advance to the general election, regardless of their party. This system can lead to a general election featuring candidates from the same party or independent candidates, reflecting a more direct form of voter choice. 2. Primary schedule and impact. Primaries are held on different dates across states, with some states voting early in the cycle and others later. The schedule is crucial as early primaries, such as the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, often set the tone for the rest of the election cycle. These early contests can provide momentum for candidates who perform well, influencing fundraising, media coverage, and overall campaign viability. The scheduling of primaries can also lead to strategic considerations. Candidates often focus their resources on early states to gain momentum and establish themselves as viable contenders. As the primary season progresses, the focus may shift to states with larger delegate counts or those that are considered swing states. 3. Voter participation and impact. Primaries offer a more private and straightforward method of participation compared to caucuses. Voters simply cast a ballot in secret, which can increase participation among those who prefer a less public and time-consuming process. However, the type of primary can affect voter engagement. Closed primaries may limit participation to those already affiliated with the party, while open primaries can engage a broader cross-section of the electorate. The results of primaries have a significant impact on the nomination process. The delegates awarded based on primary outcomes are crucial for securing the party nomination. Candidates who perform well in primaries often gain momentum and credibility, influencing endorsements, fundraising, and overall campaign strategy. B. Caucuses. Caucuses are a more localized and participatory process compared to primaries. In a caucus, voters gather in local meetings to discuss and publicly declare their support for a candidate. This process involves several stages and reflects a more engaged form of political participation. 1. The caucus process. Local meetings. Caucuses typically occur at the precinct or district level, where voters gather in designated locations such as schools, community centers, or other public spaces. During these meetings, participants engage in discussions about the candidates, debating their merits and addressing any concerns. Public declaration. Unlike primaries, where voting is private, caucuses require participants to publicly declare their support for a candidate. This public declaration can involve a show of hands or other visible forms of support. In some caucuses, voters may be required to physically move to different areas of the room to show their support for different candidates. Delegate selection. After the public declaration of support, caucus participants select delegates to represent their preferences at higher-level caucuses or conventions. The process of selecting delegates may involve additional rounds of discussion and voting, with delegates ultimately representing the preferences of their precinct or district. 2. Advantages and challenges. Participatory nature. Caucuses are highly participatory and encourage active engagement from voters. Participants have the opportunity to discuss and debate the candidates, contributing to a more informed and deliberative decision-making process. This participatory nature can foster a deeper sense of involvement and commitment to the political process. Time-consuming. One of the main challenges of caucuses is their time-consuming nature. The process can take several hours, requiring participants to spend significant time discussing and voting. This can be a barrier for individuals with time constraints or those who may find the process daunting. Accessibility. Caucuses can also present challenges related to accessibility. The requirement to attend a specific meeting at a designated time can be difficult for those with work or family commitments. Additionally, the public nature of the process may discourage some voters from participating due to concerns about privacy or social pressure. Impact on voter turnout. The time and effort required to participate in a caucus can lead to lower voter turnout compared to primaries. The demanding nature of the process may deter some voters from participating, potentially affecting the representativeness of the results. 3. Historical and regional variations. Caucuses have historically been more prevalent in certain states, such as Iowa and Nevada, which have a tradition of using caucuses to select delegates. These states' caucuses are often seen as critical early tests in the presidential nomination process, and candidates frequently invest significant resources and time in these states. The variation in caucus rules and procedures across states can also lead to differences in how the process is conducted and experienced by voters. Some states may have more streamlined caucus processes, while others may involve complex procedures and multiple rounds of voting. Conclusion: primaries and caucuses are foundational elements of the American electoral process, each offering distinct methods for selecting presidential candidates. Primaries provide a more private and straightforward voting experience, while caucuses offer a more participatory but time-consuming approach. Both systems play a crucial role in shaping the political landscape and determining which candidates will advance to the general election. Understanding these processes provides insight into the complexities of democratic participation and the diverse ways in which voters engage in the political system. Delegates, representatives of voter preferences. Delegates are a crucial component of the U.S. presidential election process, serving as representatives of voter preferences from primaries and caucuses. Their role is central to determining the party's presidential nominee, and understanding their function provides insight into how candidates are selected and how the democratic process is structured. A. The role of delegates. 1. Function of delegates. Delegates are individuals selected through primaries and caucuses to represent the preferences of voters at the national party conventions. Their primary role is to cast votes for the party's presidential nominee based on the results of the primary elections and caucuses in their respective states. The candidate who secures a majority of delegate votes at the national convention becomes the party's official nominee. Delegates act as intermediaries between the voters and the convention. They are responsible for reflecting the will of the voters in their state or district and participating in the formal process of nominating the party's candidate for president. 2. Types of delegates. There are several types of delegates, each with specific roles and selection processes. Pledged delegates. These delegates are bound to vote for a specific candidate based on the results of the primaries and caucuses. Their allocation is determined by the outcome of these early contests, with delegates pledged to the candidate who receives the most votes or support in their state. Pledged delegates are typically awarded proportionally or on a winner-take-all basis, depending on state rules. Unpledged delegates, superdelegates in the Democratic Party. Unpledged delegates, also known as superdelegates, are party leaders and elected officials who are not bound by primary or caucus results. They can choose to support any candidate at the convention. Superdelegates are intended to provide party leadership and experience in the nomination process, but their role has been controversial due to concerns about their influence on the outcome. Alternate delegates. Alternate delegates are selected alongside pledged delegates and serve as substitutes if a pledged delegate is unable to attend the convention. They are also bound by the same rules as pledged delegates and vote in place of the original delegate if necessary. At-large delegates. At-large delegates are elected to represent the entire state rather than specific districts. They are typically chosen based on the overall results of the primary or caucus and may represent a broader constituency. B. Delegate allocation. 1. Allocation methods. The method of allocating delegates can vary between states and parties, and it has a significant impact on the nomination process. Proportional allocation. In states with proportional allocation, delegates are distributed among candidates based on their share of the vote. For example, if a candidate receives 40% of the vote, they would be awarded 40% of the delegates. This method allows for a more representative distribution of delegates and reflects the diversity of voter preferences. Winner-take-all allocation. In winner-take-all states, the candidate who receives the most votes gets all of the state's delegates. This method can lead to a more decisive outcome and can significantly boost a candidate's delegate count if they win a large state. However, it can also lead to a less proportional representation of voter preferences. Hybrid systems. Some states use hybrid systems that combine elements of proportional and winner-take-all methods. For example, a state might allocate a portion of its delegates based on proportional representation and another portion based on winner-take-all principles. 2. Impact of delegate allocation. The allocation of delegates has a profound impact on the nomination process. A candidate's ability to secure a majority of delegates is crucial for winning the party nomination. The distribution of delegates can affect campaign strategies, as candidates may focus their efforts on states with significant delegate counts or those that use winner-take-all methods to gain an advantage. The delegate allocation process also influences the overall dynamics of the race. Candidates who perform well in early primaries and caucuses can build momentum and attract more support. Conversely, a candidate who performs poorly may struggle to catch up in the delegate count, affecting their viability in the race. C. National conventions. 1. Role of conventions. The national conventions are the culmination of the delegate selection process. At these conventions, delegates gather to officially nominate the party's presidential candidate. The conventions also serve as a platform for the party to adopt its platform, set policy priorities, and unify behind the chosen nominee. Nomination process. Delegates cast their votes for the presidential nominee based on the results of the primaries and caucuses. A candidate must secure a majority of delegate votes to win the nomination. In cases where no candidate receives a majority on the first ballot, additional rounds of voting may occur, with delegates potentially shifting their support. Platform adoption. During the convention, the party adopts its platform, outlining its policy positions and goals. The platform reflects the party's priorities and serves as a guide for the party's legislative agenda and campaign messaging. Party unity. The convention is an opportunity for the party to present a unified front and build support for the general election campaign. It features speeches, endorsements, and celebrations designed to rally the party base and generate enthusiasm for the upcoming election. 2. Historical context. The role and influence of delegates have evolved over time. In the past, delegate selection and allocation processes were often more opaque, with party leaders having greater control over the nomination process. Reforms in the late 20th century, including changes to primary and caucus rules and the introduction of superdelegates, have aimed to make the process more democratic and transparent. The delegate system has also faced criticism and scrutiny, particularly regarding the role of superdelegates and the impact of delegate allocation methods on the representativeness of the process. Ongoing debates about these issues reflect broader discussions about the balance between party control and democratic participation. Conclusion. Delegates play a pivotal role in the U.S. presidential election process, serving as representatives of voter preferences and determining the party's nominee. Their allocation and selection are crucial to the nomination process, reflecting the outcomes of primaries and caucuses and influencing campaign strategies and party dynamics. Understanding the role of delegates provides insight into how presidential candidates are chosen and highlights the complexities of the democratic process. Party conventions. Party conventions are integral to the U.S. electoral process, serving as the formal conclusion of the candidate selection phase and the launchpad for the general election campaign. These events bring together delegates, adopt party platforms, and showcase key endorsements. Occasionally, conventions may become contested, leading to extended deliberations and multiple rounds of voting. A. National conventions. 1. Purpose and significance. National conventions are pivotal events in the presidential election cycle, held by each major political party to finalize the nomination of their presidential candidate. Delegates from across the country gather at these conventions to cast their votes for the party's nominee, officially designating the candidate who will represent the party in the general election. The conventions serve several key purposes. Nomination of the presidential candidate. The primary function of the National Convention is to formally nominate the party's candidate for president. Delegates vote based on the outcomes of the primaries and caucuses, and the candidate who secures a majority of delegate votes becomes the party's nominee. This process solidifies the candidate's position and marks the transition from the primary phase to the general election campaign. Adoption of the party platform. Conventions are also a platform for adopting the party's platform, a comprehensive document outlining the party's policy positions, priorities, and goals. The platform reflects the collective stance of the party on various issues and serves as a guide for the party's legislative agenda and campaign messaging. The adoption of the platform is often a culmination of extensive negotiations and debates, reflecting the compromises and agreements reached during the primary season. Showcasing support and unity. The convention provides an opportunity for the party to present a united front and rally its base. It features speeches from prominent party leaders, endorsers, and influential figures who support the nominee. These speeches and appearances are designed to energize the party base, generate enthusiasm for the candidate, and build momentum for the general election campaign. 2. Structure and activities. National conventions are typically structured around several key activities. Opening ceremonies. The convention begins with formal opening ceremonies, which often include a procession of delegates, national anthems, and introductory speeches. These ceremonies set the tone for the event and provide a platform for the party to showcase its unity and strength. Delegate voting. Delegates cast their votes for the presidential nominee based on the results of the primaries and caucuses. The voting process may occur over multiple rounds if no candidate secures a majority on the first ballot. In some cases, delegates may be released from their pledges after the initial round of voting, allowing for further deliberation and negotiation. Keynote speeches. The convention features keynote speeches from prominent figures within the party. These speeches are often delivered by rising stars or influential leaders who articulate the party's vision and highlight the strengths of the nominee. Keynote speeches play a crucial role in shaping the narrative and messaging of the campaign. Party business. In addition to the nomination process, conventions include sessions where party business is conducted, such as the adoption of resolutions, election of party officials, and discussions of policy issues. These sessions provide a forum for delegates to address internal party matters and set the direction for the future. Media coverage and public engagement. Conventions attract significant media attention and provide a platform for the party to engage with the public. The media coverage includes live broadcasts, interviews, and analysis, amplifying the party's message and generating broader visibility for the nominee and the convention proceedings. B. Contested conventions. 1. Definition and causes. A contested convention occurs when no candidate secures a majority of delegates during the primaries and caucuses, leading to a scenario where multiple candidates are still in contention at the convention. This situation may arise due to a fragmented field of candidates, strategic voting, or close competition in delegate-rich states. Contested conventions are relatively rare but can have significant implications for the nomination process. Delegates' role. At a contested convention, delegates may be required to vote in multiple rounds to determine the nominee. If no candidate achieves a majority in the initial round, subsequent rounds of voting may occur, with delegates potentially being released from their pledges and allowed to support other candidates. This process can lead to extensive negotiations, backroom deals, and shifting alliances. Impact on the nomination process. Contested conventions can prolong the nomination process and create uncertainty within the party. The extended deliberations and negotiations may impact the party's ability to focus on the general election campaign and could lead to divisions or conflicts within the party. The eventual nominee may face challenges in unifying the party and building momentum for the general election. 2. Historical examples. Historical instances of contested conventions illustrate the potential complexity and drama of this scenario. Republican Convention of 1912. The Republican Convention of 1912 is a notable example of a contested convention. Incumbent President William Howard Taft faced a strong challenge from former President Theodore Roosevelt, who ran as a Progressive Party candidate. The convention saw multiple rounds of voting and intense negotiations before Taft secured the nomination. Democratic Convention of 1968. The Democratic Convention of 1968 in Chicago was marked by significant turmoil and protest. While the nomination was not contested in the strict sense, the convention was contentious due to the political and social unrest of the era. The process highlighted the challenges of unifying a party divided by internal conflicts and external pressures. Republican Convention of 1976. The Republican Convention of 1976 saw a contested nomination battle between incumbent President Gerald Ford and challenger Ronald Reagan. Despite Reagan's strong performance in the primaries, Ford secured the nomination through a combination of delegate support and strategic maneuvering. 3. Consequences and considerations. Contested conventions can have various consequences for the party and the broader election landscape. Party unity. The process of resolving a contested convention can impact party unity. The need for negotiation and compromise may lead to a temporary rift or dissatisfaction among supporters of different candidates. The party's ability to effectively address these issues and present a unified front is crucial for success in the general election. Public perception. Contested conventions can also influence public perception of the party and its nominee. The extended process and visible internal conflicts may affect voter confidence and impact the party's ability to connect with the electorate. Strategic adjustments. Parties may need to adjust their strategies and messaging following a contested convention. The experience of navigating a contested nomination can provide valuable lessons and insights for the general election campaign. Conclusion. Party conventions play a central role in the U.S. electoral process, serving as the venue for finalizing presidential nominations and setting the stage for the general election. National conventions provide a platform for nominating candidates, adopting party platforms, and showcasing support, while contested conventions highlight the complexities and challenges of the nomination process. Understanding the dynamics of party conventions provides insight into the mechanisms of candidate selection and the broader electoral landscape. The general election. The general election is the culminating stage of the U.S. electoral process, where the official nominees from each major party face off to become the President of the United States. This final phase is the most direct form of democratic engagement, as voters across the nation choose their preferred candidate. The general election is a critical event that determines the leadership of the country and sets the stage for future policy decisions. A. The election campaign. 1. Campaign strategies. After the party conventions, the official nominees embark on an intensive campaign to garner support from voters. The general election campaign is characterized by several key strategies. National campaign. Candidates focus on nationwide outreach, aiming to build a broad coalition of voters. This includes traveling across the country, participating in rallies, and engaging with local media. The goal is to connect with voters in diverse regions and address their specific concerns. Debates and public appearances. Candidates participate in a series of debates and public forums, which provide opportunities to present their policy positions, challenge their opponents, and engage with voters. These debates are highly visible events that can significantly influence public opinion and campaign dynamics. Advertising and media. Campaigns invest heavily in advertising across various media platforms, including television, radio, digital, and print. Ads are crafted to highlight the candidate's strengths, contrast with opponents, and address key issues. Media coverage and endorsements also play a significant role in shaping voter perceptions. Grassroots efforts. Grassroots campaigning involves mobilizing local supporters and volunteers to engage in activities such as canvassing, phone banking, and organizing community events. This direct engagement helps build personal connections with voters and encourages voter turnout. Fundraising. Campaigns require substantial financial resources for advertising, events, and operations. Candidates engage in extensive fundraising efforts, including rallies, donor events, and online campaigns, to secure the necessary funds. 2. Key issues and messaging. During the general election campaign, candidates focus on key issues that resonate with voters. These issues may include the economy, healthcare, foreign policy, immigration, and social justice. Candidates develop messaging and policy proposals to address these concerns and differentiate themselves from their opponents. Issue framing. Candidates frame issues in ways that align with their campaign priorities and appeal to target voter groups. For example, a candidate might emphasize economic growth and job creation in swing states with high unemployment rates. Policy proposals. Candidates present detailed policy proposals and plans to address the issues that matter most to voters. These proposals are often highlighted in speeches, debates, and campaign materials. Contrast with opponents. Candidates use contrast ads and messaging to differentiate themselves from their opponents. This may involve critiquing the opponent's record, highlighting policy differences, and questioning their qualifications. B. Voting process. 1. Voting methods. The general election is conducted through various voting methods, which can vary by state and locality. In-person voting. Voters cast their ballots in person at designated polling places on Election Day. This traditional method involves visiting a polling station, presenting identification, where required, and casting a vote using paper ballots or electronic voting machines. Early voting. Many states offer early voting, allowing voters to cast their ballots before Election Day. Early voting can be conducted at designated locations or via mail, providing flexibility for voters who may be unable to vote on the official Election Day. Absentee voting. Absentee voting allows voters to cast their ballots by mail or through other means if they are unable to vote in person. Voters typically need to request an absentee ballot in advance and follow specific procedures to ensure their vote is counted. 2. Voter turnout and participation. Voter turnout is a critical factor in the general election. Higher voter turnout reflects a more engaged electorate and can influence the outcome of the election. Mobilization efforts. Campaigns and advocacy groups engage in mobilization efforts to encourage voter participation. This includes voter registration drives, educational campaigns, and outreach to underrepresented communities. Impact of turnout. Turnout can significantly impact the election results. Higher turnout in key demographic groups or swing states can shift the balance of power and determine the winner. C. The Electoral College. 1. Overview of the Electoral College. The U.S. presidential election is determined through the Electoral College system. This system involves electors who cast votes based on the outcome of the general election in each state. Electoral votes. Each state is allocated a certain number of electoral votes based on its representation in Congress, the sum of its senators and representatives. The total number of electoral votes is 538, with a majority of 270 needed to win the presidency. Winner-take-all system. Most states use a winner-take-all system, where the candidate who wins the popular vote in the state receives all of its electoral votes. Maine and Nebraska use a proportional system, where electoral votes are distributed based on the popular vote within congressional districts. Role of electors. Electors are chosen by the parties in each state and are pledged to vote for their party's candidate. Electors meet in their respective states in December to cast their votes for president and vice president. 2. The role of the Electoral College. The Electoral College serves to balance the influence of states with varying populations and ensure that smaller states have a voice in the election process. Federalism. The system reflects the federal nature of the U.S. government, where states have a role in electing the president. It ensures that both populous and less populous states have a say in the outcome. Controversies and debates. The Electoral College has been the subject of ongoing debate and controversy, particularly regarding its alignment with the popular vote. In some elections, the winner of the popular vote has not won the presidency due to the Electoral College outcome. D. Post-election process. 1. Certification and transition. After the general election, the results are certified and the transition process begins. Certification of results. State and local officials certify the election results, and the Electoral College votes are officially counted. Any disputes or challenges to the results are addressed through legal and procedural channels. Transition period. The transition period involves preparing for the new administration. The incoming president and their team work to establish their administration, appoint key officials, and outline their policy agenda. 2. Inauguration. The inauguration marks the official beginning of the new president's term. It is a ceremonial event where the president-elect is sworn in and officially takes office. Inauguration ceremony. The ceremony includes the oath of office, inaugural address, and various celebrations and events. It symbolizes the peaceful transfer of power and the start of the new administration. First actions. The new president begins implementing their agenda, making appointments, and addressing key issues as they assume leadership of the country. Conclusion. The general election is the culmination of the U.S. electoral process, where voters choose the next president of the United States. This phase involves an intense campaign, diverse voting methods, and the unique Electoral College system. Understanding the dynamics of the general election provides insight into the democratic process and the mechanisms through which political leadership is determined. C. Role in contested and non-contested conventions. 1. Contested conventions. In a contested convention, where no candidate secures a majority of delegates through primaries and caucuses, superdelegates can play a pivotal role. Decision-making. Superdelegates can decide the outcome of the convention by casting their votes based on their preferences and assessments of the candidates. Their influence can be crucial in breaking a deadlock and determining the nominee. Negotiation and compromise. Superdelegates may be involved in negotiations and compromises to resolve the contested situation. Their role can help facilitate a resolution and unify the party behind a single candidate. 2. Non-contested conventions. In non-contested conventions, where a clear frontrunner emerges with a majority of delegates, the role of superdelegates is less pronounced but still relevant. Endorsement and support. Superdelegates typically align with the leading candidate, providing formal support and signaling party unity. Their endorsement can help consolidate the nominee's position and build momentum for the general election. Platform and policy influence. Superdelegates may contribute to discussions on the party platform and policy priorities, influencing the direction of the party's agenda and shaping its positions on key issues. D. Future prospects and reforms. 1. Ongoing debates. The role of superdelegates continues to be a topic of debate within the Democratic Party and among political analysts. There are ongoing discussions about the balance between ensuring party leadership input and maintaining democratic fairness. Reform proposals. Various reform proposals have been suggested to address concerns about superdelegates, including reducing their influence further or eliminating their role altogether. These proposals aim to enhance the democratic nature of the nomination process and address criticisms related to representation. Party dynamics. The impact of superdelegates on party dynamics and electoral strategy is an area of ongoing analysis. Changes in their role could influence how candidates campaign, how party leaders engage with the nomination process, and how voters perceive the system. 2. Adaptations and adjustments. The Democratic Party has made adjustments to the role of superdelegates in response to feedback and evolving perspectives on democratic representation. Implementation of reforms. Recent reforms have sought to balance the role of superdelegates with the need for a more transparent and representative nomination process. These reforms aim to address criticisms while retaining the benefits of experienced party leadership input. Future developments. The role of superdelegates may continue to evolve as the party and its members assess the effectiveness of existing reforms and consider new approaches to the nomination process. Conclusion. Superdelegates are a distinctive feature of the Democratic Party's nomination process, providing a mechanism for party leaders and officials to influence the selection of the presidential nominee. Their role encompasses both significant influence and considerable controversy, reflecting ongoing debates about democratic fairness and representation. Understanding the function and impact of superdelegates offers insight into the complexities of the nomination process and the broader dynamics of party politics. Advantages and criticisms. The primary and caucus system for selecting presidential nominees has its share of advantages and criticisms. These processes are designed to engage a broad spectrum of voters and provide early indicators of candidate viability. However, they also face significant critiques related to fairness and equity. Understanding both the benefits and drawbacks of primaries and caucuses offers a comprehensive view of their role in the electoral process. Advantages. 1. Broad citizen participation. Primaries and caucuses are designed to involve a wide range of voters in the candidate selection process. This inclusivity is a key advantage of the system. Increased voter engagement. Primaries and caucuses provide opportunities for citizens to participate actively in the democratic process. By casting ballots or participating in discussions, voters can express their preferences for candidates and influence the nomination process. This engagement helps to ensure that the candidates selected reflect the will of the electorate. Diverse input. The decentralized nature of primaries and caucuses allows for input from voters across various states and regions. This diversity helps to ensure that the selection of candidates is not dominated by a single geographic or demographic group. As a result, the candidates who emerge from the process are more likely to have broad national appeal. Early feedback. The early stages of the primary and caucus process provide valuable feedback on candidates' strengths and weaknesses. Voters' reactions to candidates' policies, personalities, and campaign strategies can shape the trajectory of the election and guide candidates in refining their platforms and messaging. 2. Early indicators of candidate support. Primaries and caucuses offer several benefits as early indicators of candidate support. Testing ground. The early contests in states such as Iowa and New Hampshire serve as testing grounds for candidates. Success in these states can provide momentum and credibility, while poor performance can indicate potential challenges. This early feedback helps to winnow the field of candidates and focus attention on those with broader appeal. Voter preferences. The results of primaries and caucuses reflect the preferences of voters in different regions. This early data can provide insights into which candidates are gaining traction and which are struggling to build support. Candidates who perform well in early contests are often perceived as frontrunners, while those who lag behind may face increased pressure to drop out. Campaign dynamics. The primary and caucus process helps to shape the dynamics of the campaign. Candidates who secure early victories can build momentum, attract additional support, and secure endorsements from key figures. Conversely, those who struggle early may face difficulties in fundraising and building a strong campaign organization. Criticisms. 1. Favoring well-funded candidates. One of the major criticisms of the primary and caucus system is that it tends to favor well-funded candidates. Financial advantages. The cost of running a competitive campaign is substantial, and candidates with significant financial resources are better positioned to sustain their efforts. Well-funded candidates can afford extensive advertising, travel, and campaign staff, giving them an advantage over less well-funded opponents. Barriers to entry. The high costs associated with campaigning can create barriers for candidates who lack financial resources or support from wealthy donors. This can limit the diversity of candidates who are able to compete effectively, potentially excluding those with innovative ideas or grassroots support but limited financial backing. Impact on voter choice. When well-funded candidates dominate the primaries and caucuses, it can limit voter choice and reduce the opportunity for less well-known or less financially secure candidates to make their case. This can lead to a narrowing of the field and a focus on candidates who are more appealing to major donors and special interests. 2. Disproportionate attention to early states. Another criticism is that the primary and caucus system gives disproportionate attention to states with early contests. Early state influence. States such as Iowa and New Hampshire hold their primaries and caucuses early in the election cycle, giving them significant influence over the nomination process. Success in these states can generate momentum and media attention, while failure can diminish a candidate's chances. This focus on early states can skew the overall perception of candidate viability. Geographic bias. The emphasis on early states can lead to a geographic bias in the nomination process. The concerns and priorities of voters in Iowa and New Hampshire may not fully represent the broader national electorate. Candidates may tailor their messages and policies to appeal to these early state voters, potentially neglecting the issues and preferences of voters in other regions. Campaign focus. The need to compete in early states can lead to a concentration of campaign resources and attention in these areas. Candidates may spend disproportionate amounts of time and money in early states, potentially at the expense of building a national campaign infrastructure and addressing issues that resonate with voters in later states. 3. Potential for low voter turnout. Primaries and caucuses may also suffer from issues related to voter turnout. Caucus participation. Caucuses, in particular, require voters to participate in lengthy and often complex meetings, which can discourage participation. The time commitment and public nature of caucus voting may deter some voters, leading to lower turnout compared to more straightforward primary voting. Voter fatigue. The extended primary and caucus schedule can contribute to voter fatigue, with many voters feeling overwhelmed by the length and intensity of the campaign season. This fatigue can impact voter engagement and turnout, affecting the overall effectiveness of the primary process. Disproportionate influence. Low voter turnout in primaries and caucuses can lead to outcomes that do not fully reflect the preferences of the broader electorate. Candidates who perform well in states with low turnout may gain an advantage that does not necessarily align with national sentiment. Conclusion. Primaries and caucuses are essential components of the U.S. electoral process, offering opportunities for broad citizen participation and early indicators of candidate support. They allow voters to engage actively in selecting presidential nominees and provide a platform for testing candidates' appeal. However, the system is not without its criticisms. It can favor well-funded candidates, give disproportionate attention to early states, and face challenges related to voter turnout. Balancing the advantages and addressing the criticisms of the primary and caucus system are crucial for ensuring a fair and representative nomination process. The evolution of the presidential primary system. The presidential primary system in the United States has undergone significant evolution since its inception. This evolution has been driven by changes in party rules, media coverage, and campaign strategies. Understanding this historical development provides insight into how the current system functions and how it has been shaped by various political and social forces. Early practices and party nominations. 1. Early presidential nominations. In the early years of the Republic, presidential nominations were conducted in a manner that reflected the political practices of the time. The process was characterized by party leaders and conventions. Initially, presidential candidates were often chosen by party leaders and elites. The process was informal and lacked the structured mechanisms that would later develop. Candidates were typically selected through meetings of party leaders who had significant influence over the nomination. Lack of primaries and caucuses. The concept of primaries and caucuses did not exist during the early years of the Republic. Instead, nominations were often decided behind closed doors or through state conventions, with little direct input from ordinary voters. 2. The advent of state primaries. The early 20th century saw the introduction of state primaries, marking the beginning of a more structured nomination process. Progressive era reforms. The Progressive era, spanning the early 1900s, brought about significant reforms aimed at increasing democratic participation and reducing the influence of party machines. One of these reforms was the introduction of state primaries, which allowed voters to directly participate in selecting party nominees. State primaries and party control. Initially, state primaries were non-binding, meaning that they did not require delegates to vote in accordance with the primary results. This system allowed party leaders to maintain control over the nomination process, even as voters were given a greater role. 2. The modern primary system. 1. The 1968 Democratic National Convention. The 1968 Democratic National Convention was a turning point in the evolution of the presidential primary system. Controversy and protests. The convention, held in Chicago, was marked by widespread protests and controversy. Many Democrats were dissatisfied with the nomination process, which they felt was controlled by party elites and did not reflect the will of the voters. Commission on Party Structure and Delegate Selection. In response to the unrest, the Democratic Party established the McGovern-Fraser Commission to examine and reform the nomination process. The Commission's recommendations led to significant changes, including the implementation of more open and transparent procedures for selecting delegates. 2. The introduction of binding primaries. The reforms of the early 1970s resulted in the introduction of binding primaries. Binding delegate selection. The reforms established the requirement that delegates be bound to vote for the candidate who won the primary or caucus in their state. This shift aimed to enhance the democratic nature of the process and ensure that voter preferences were more accurately reflected in the delegate selection. Increased state participation. The reforms also encouraged greater participation by states in the primary process. States began to schedule their primaries and caucuses at various times throughout the election cycle, leading to the creation of a more extended and complex nomination calendar. 3. Media coverage and campaign strategies. 1. The role of media coverage. Media coverage has played a crucial role in shaping the presidential primary process. Television and presidential debates. The advent of television in the 1960s and 1970s brought presidential debates and campaign coverage into the homes of millions of Americans. Televised debates became a key component of the primary process, allowing candidates to present their platforms and engage with voters on a national stage. 24-hour news cycle. The rise of cable news and the 24-hour news cycle in the late 20th century further amplified the media's role in the primary process. Continuous coverage of candidates' campaigns, scandals, and controversies has increased the visibility and scrutiny of candidates. Social media and digital campaigning. In the 21st century, social media platforms and digital campaigning have transformed the way candidates communicate with voters. Social media allows for real-time interaction, targeted advertising, and grassroots mobilization, significantly influencing campaign strategies and voter engagement. 2. Changes in campaign strategies. The evolution of campaign strategies has been closely linked to changes in the primary system. Early and aggressive campaigning. The extended primary calendar has led candidates to engage in early and aggressive campaigning. Candidates often begin their campaigns well before the primary season, focusing on building name recognition, fundraising, and organizing grassroots support. Data analytics and micro-targeting. The use of data analytics and micro-targeting has become a key element of modern campaigns. Campaigns use sophisticated data analysis to identify and target specific voter segments, tailor messages, and optimize campaign resources. Super PACs and campaign finance. The rise of super political action committees, super PACs, and changes in campaign finance laws have influenced the primary process. Super PACs can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to support candidates, leading to concerns about the influence of money in politics and its impact on the democratic process. 4. Reform efforts and future directions. 1. Ongoing reform efforts. Efforts to reform the presidential primary system continue to be a topic of debate. Proposals for reform. Various proposals have been put forward to address perceived shortcomings in the primary system. These include suggestions for a national primary day, changes to the delegate allocation process, and modifications to the role of superdelegates. Debates on fairness and representation. Discussions about the fairness and representation of the primary system focus on issues such as the influence of early states, the impact of money in politics, and the need for greater voter engagement. Reform advocates seek to ensure that the process is more democratic and reflective of the diverse electorate. 2. Potential future developments. The future of the presidential primary system may involve further changes and adaptations. Technological advances. Advances in technology and digital campaigning are likely to continue shaping the primary process. Innovations in data analytics, communication, and voter engagement may influence how candidates campaign and how voters participate. Changes in voter preferences. Shifts in voter preferences and attitudes may lead to changes in the primary system. As voters demand greater transparency, inclusivity, and responsiveness, the primary process may evolve to better align with these expectations. Nationalization of primaries. The idea of a national primary day, where all states vote on the same day, is a topic of ongoing discussion. Such a change could address issues related to the influence of early states and provide a more equitable process for selecting nominees. Conclusion. The presidential primary system has evolved significantly over time, reflecting changes in party rules, media coverage, and campaign strategies. From the early practices of party nominations to the modern primary system influenced by media and technology, the process has continually adapted to meet the needs and expectations of voters. Understanding this evolution provides valuable context for the current primary system and highlights ongoing efforts to improve and reform the nomination process. As the political landscape continues to change, the presidential primary system will likely continue to evolve, shaping the future of American democracy.